Okay, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us on this very sunny, warm evening. You are at the Irish Wildlife Trust webinar, and this evening our topic is on trawling and sprat protection in Ireland's inshore area. I'm Kieran Flood from the Irish Wildlife Trust. I'll be the host for the evening. This evening, we will explore the recent ban announced on fishing vessels of 18 meters, over 18 meters within Ireland's 6 nautical mile zone. We'll ask what is this ban and then how will it work? And is it enough to protect marine life in our inshore areas? So we'll dig into those questions. And all fisheries measures impact on people who make a livelihood off fishing. And at the IWT, we always call for supports for people impacted by conservation measures, both like on land and at sea. So that's something we keep in mind, and we'll probably touch a bit on that as well, and about how we would actually make everything work for everybody in terms of nature and people. So there are some of the things that we're aware of at the IWT, and yeah, so to do this, to help us kind of delve into this topic and demystify some of the stuff around this ban and learn a bit more about how marine fisheries work in Ireland, we're joined by two great guests. We've got Dolf D'hondt, who is a marine conservation advocate, who works with groups such as Coastwatch Ireland, Streamscapes, and Save Our Sprat Bantry Bay. Hello, Dolf.
Good evening, Kieran. Hello.
Hello, thanks for joining us. And then we've also got Grace Carr, who is the Irish Wildlife Trust's Marine Advocacy Officer. And Grace is a marine biologist who has been advocating for the protection of marine life here at the Irish Wildlife Trust for quite a few years now, which is brilliant. And before that as well. So thanks for joining us, Grace.
No worries, thank you.
Grand. Okay. Well, we'll be hearing from both Grace and Dolf. They've got a few short presentations lined up for you. And we will probably just get stuck into those. So yeah, Grace, do you want to start us off with your presentation?
Yeah, no worries. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so thanks, Kieran, for the introduction. So yes, this is just a real short presentation just to give a bit of background on the 6 nautical mile trawling ban, because this is an issue that has been talked about and has been going on for quite a number of years now. So before I get into the history of it, just going to explain what the 6 nautical miles actually means. And some people mightn't have actually seen a visual representation of it before. So we have a wee map of Ireland here, and you can see along the outside of it, there are two lines going around it. So the black line, that's a line that represents the baselines. So as you can see, it kind of touches the coast in areas, and then around sort of larger bays and stuff, it goes between the headlands. So the entire bay is actually encompassed within the baseline. And the 6 nautical miles actually runs from the baseline. So it doesn't run from the coast in all places. It'll run from the baseline. So a good sort of very clear example there is around Donegal Bay. So in the northwest bit there of Ireland, you can see that the baseline runs from one end of the bay right down to the bottom, and the 6 nautical miles comes out from that. So this map as well also shows our protected areas within this zone as well. So Ireland still doesn't have any national marine protected area legislation. All of our protected areas are designated under the EU Birds and Habitats Directive. So the areas here that are kind of pinky red, those are our special protection areas, and those are designated under the Birds Directive for different species of birds. And the areas that are kind of purpley blue, those are designated under the EU Habitats Directive. So they're designated for different types of habitats and different species as well, other mammals, fish, and cetacean species. So as you can see, there's a lot of protected areas within the 6 nautical mile zone. It's not all of our marine protected areas. We do have some offshore ones, but quite a lot of them are within this area. And unfortunately, these areas haven't been, effectively monitored or managed so far by the Irish government. So this is something that really needs to be worked on as well to properly protect these areas. So moving on to what has happened so far with the 6 nautical mile ban. So the ban was first proposed in 2019 after a public consultation at the end of 2018 by the then Fisheries Minister, Michael McCreed. And there was around 900 submissions to this first consultation. And it was decided that vessels over 18 metres would be restricted within the 6 nautical mile zone starting from 2020. And with that, they were also going to be given a grace period of a few years for vessels that were taking part in the Sprat fishery so that they would have time to transition away from it. But unfortunately, a judicial review was taken by 2 fishermen against the minister's directive, and the ban was overturned. This caused a lot of outrage across many different sectors because this ban was probably the most effective conservation measure that the Irish government had ever implemented in the marine space. So there was real sort of outcry across like not only conservationists and scientists, but also the inshore fishing sector as well. And the inshore fishing sector, as well as the environmental NGOs, actually did write a letter to Charlie McConalogue, who was then the fisheries minister, wanting this appealed. And the ban was then temporarily reinstated again in 2021 by the Court of Appeal. But then again, unfortunately, in 2023, the ban was overturned, and it was overturned on a legal technicality. It wasn't overturned because it was decided that this conservation measure wasn't needed or that it wasn't going to do a good job. It was literally just on a legal technicality. So another public consultation was then called for because there was again a lot of outcry over this ban being overturned. And this public consultation took place at the start of 2024, and there was over 5,500 responses to it. So it kind of shows how much people do care about it, going from 900, which is still quite a lot for the first consultation, to 5,500 for this one. So we did submit to this consultation. The Irish Wildlife Trust submitted this consultation, and we did run a small campaign as well to sort of raise awareness about it and to talk about what option we were going to pick. So the consultation gave 4 options. The first one was that there'd be no change to the status quo and business as usual would carry on. Option 2 was that all sea fishing boats would be excluded from pair trawling inside the 6 nautical mile zone. So pair trawling is whenever 2 vessels, are going along side by side and they have a net going between them and they're using this to catch fish. So this is used by smaller vessels and larger vessels as well. So this would have banned all vessel sizes from doing this. But we didn't think that this was a viable option because it would have had an unfair sort of effect on the smaller boats as well. While larger boats can just, pull quite a large net behind them. They wouldn't need to do the pair trawling as well. So we didn't think that this option was the correct one to take. Option 3 was that all vessels over 18 metres would be excluded from trawling in the 6 nautical mile zone. And option 4 was that all vessels over 15 metres would be excluded from trawling in this zone. So we went with option 3, that vessels over 18 metres should be banned. And some of the reasons that we went for this is that we did believe that it would have the greatest environmental and conservation benefit, but also help preserve and support our inshore fishing sector as well as coastal communities. Because while we were taking into account the ecological impacts of it, we also wanted to take into account the economic and cultural aspects of any fisheries measures as well. We did add in extra points to our submission too, that while this is a good first step, it wasn't enough, and that there does need to be sort of species-specific management plans put in place for fisheries in the inshore area, because those are missing at the moment. So the results from this consultation showed that 94% of people indicated that at a minimum, their preferred option was that sea fishing boats over 18 metres should be excluded from trawling in the 6 nautical mile zone. So that's an overwhelming majority of people that believe that this measure is vitally needed. And we really hope that this time around that this ban will be kept in place and that we won't see it being overturned again in the future. So that's just a quick history of what has happened so far, and I'll end it there.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. And yeah, no, this was something that we campaigned on quite a bit at the Irish Wildlife Trust, trying to get people to engage with those consultations, and the massive engagement was very uplifting to see. So yeah, Dolph, you're going to jump in next now and run us through a few kind of key points about terminology in the sort of marine fisheries management area, and we're going to look then a bit closer at the sort of sprat and some ideas you have there. So if you want to go ahead and share
Yeah,
screen.
thank you, Kieran. Yeah, no, just 1 second while I bring up my screen there.
You work away.
Very good. Yeah, so I'm involved in a lot of different organisations, but one organisation I'm involved in is Save Our Sprat, which was set up a couple of months ago, basically calling for a moratorium on sprat fishing. The reason for this is because we have no understanding of how large the sprat stock is. What that means is we have no idea how much sprat is in the Irish waters. And so it's very hard to have a sustainable fishery if we've no idea what a sustainable level of catching those species is. Save Our Sprat Bantry Bay was set up a few months ago to try and get a bit of momentum and to try and educate people to see what's happening and also what we think should happen going forward. I'll just quickly run through this and yeah, explain some of the terminology, because fishing can be quite complicated for people who are not involved, so I'll just try and fly through some of the stuff. So there's no quota for sprat. Quota means in Irish waters, as in European waters, there are quotas for many different species of fish. That means there's a level at which they can be caught at. Quotas are set by an international organisation called ICES, International Scientific Body, which looks at all the data and then from that says whether the quota, it specifies what level of fishing can be caught for each species. It's species specific. The problem with sprat is it has no quota, and of course the reason why we're calling for more scientific data to be gathered is because you need scientific data to be able to reach a quota figure. So we have absolutely no data at the moment, so therefore we can't have, we don't know what a sustainable level is. So ICES says that they do give advice, ICES, on sprat, but that's not legally binding. Which is quite low at the moment. It's 2,240 tonne per year. I think next year it goes down. But again, that's kind of based on very small amount of data. Bycatch, talking to different people and just an understanding of what bycatch is. So basically, when you're going out fishing, you have a target species. You have the species that you're trying to catch, and anything that you gets caught outside of that target species is called bycatch. That can be anything. Can be other types of fish, can be anything. But this is an important thing later on. Pair trawling, there's many different types of trawling, from beam trawling to all sorts of different trawling. Pair trawling is basically two vessels, as Grace explained already, two vessels going in the same direction with a large net between them. Obviously, the larger vessels can pull a larger net, and the smaller vessels have a much smaller engine capacity, so their ability to pull nets through the water is smaller, so they have to have a smaller net. The 6 nautical miles and the baselines, I think Grace explained that very well. Marine protected areas and Natura 2000 sites. Natura 2000 sites that's a term that covers both the special areas of conservation, the SACs, and the special protection areas. Unfortunately, we don't have we have no management plans for any of them. They don't even feature on the Admiralty charts. So if you're a mariner or you're out to sea, you have an Admiralty chart. So they get updated regularly for aquaculture license areas, for piers, moorings. But unfortunately, our marine protected areas or our Natura 2000 sites don't feature on those things. It'd be a simple step to just kind of correct that, because at least people would then have a chance to kind of see where our areas are. We still don't have management plans, and we still can't have enforcement until we have management plans. So there's lots of work that needs to be done there. Sorry, I'm just being distracted there. So here's a few stats here. Sprat is a keystone species. Basically, it's a forage fish. The reason why that's important is because it is a species that eats plankton. zooplankton, and then it turns that it gets eaten by lots of other species. It's the foundation on which a lot of the marine ecosystem is built. So keystone species or forage fish, similar to a sand eel, it is a very important species. Sprat has been caught while it's coming into spawn. So sprat lives in the in deeper waters, and then from about September to January, they gather in large numbers in inshore waters, in the shallower waters, to spawn. And that's when they are easy to catch, because when they're out in deeper water, they're scattered, and when they come in huge numbers, so they're easy to catch. The sprat fishing is unrestricted. There's no quota, and because we haven't been collecting any data, scientific data, as to what size the stock is. Just briefly to speak on stocks, there is a thing called the stock book. What the stock book is basically a book, I think for the last year it was over 900 pages. It basically looks at all the different species and gives whatever scientific data is known about that species in that book. And on sprat it's about a half a page for Ireland for the last number of years. So basically we have no idea what's happening. All we do know is how much sprat gets landed, and basically what boats are involved and things like that, but it doesn't actually give us any idea of the size of the stock or what a level of sprat fishing might be sustainable. The 7.5 times more sprat was caught in 2024. Basically that is ICS, that's the international scientific body which looks at statistics. Now there is some acoustic surveys which have been done, but they do get some data for sprat, but that's kind of all what we know about sprat. And we are hoping with Save Our Sprat, the campaign, to try and highlight the need for more scientific data on the sprat fishery, so that we can actually say that we can set a limit at which the fish can be caught sustainably, if there is a limit. I mean, at the moment we have no understanding. We might be, we have no idea how far it is from being depleted. We have no idea. The statistics from 2024 say that less than 2% was for human consumption, and the rest is for salmon farm feed. Yes, overfishing. It's hard to say whether something is overfished or sustainable if you have no understanding. All that we do know is looking around the coastline and looking at the level of birds and cetaceans, whales, and other fish species which feed on sprat, that those numbers are going down quite significantly. So we have what we think is overfishing, and we're taking a lot of sprat out. In the last year we've 17,000 tonnes taken out in 1 year alone, and you've a lot of people around the coastline saying that they can see impacts of that around. So we do think that there is a need to act. Who benefits from sprat? I mean, this is a very rough thing, because I think everybody benefits from sprat, but obviously sprat feed a wide range of marine species, and it drives ecotourism, it drives fishing, and it also drives all the rest of marine life. This is something that Grace covered quite a bit, I think. So to ban inshore, basically it's just a few stats on the sprat fishing. This is to do with the 18-metre ban, which we'll talk about a little bit further on. One of the things is that the 18-metre ban won't protect sprat. There is still an unrestricted sprat fishery for the under 18 metres, and they have been managing to catch roughly about 50% in the last 5 years. So from our perspective, we have no idea what a sustainable level of fishing is, and we're still allowing the under 18 metres, which can catch about 50%, to go ahead. And from our perspective, because sprat is such an important species, you're allowing, we could be in serious trouble if we keep going what we're doing. We just need scientific data, and then we can say whether we're on the right side of it or not. The moratorium is a temporary ban, it's a temporary halt. We'll go into that a little bit later on, but we do want to compensate fishermen. We're not trying to stop anyone from making a livelihood. The numbers of fishing vessels involved are very small. There's about 30 in total last year, and it was less the years before, but it's roughly about 30, and the amount of money involved is very small. And of course the spawning season for sprat starts in September, which is in a month from now, thereabouts, and so it's important that we try and do something to protect our sprat. This is just a graphic. On the one side, you have 30 vessels involved in the Sprat fishery. That's about €3 million worth of gross revenue. The amount of money that is before any expenses. 17,000 tonnes of sprat was caught in 2024, and less than 2% was for human consumption. On the other side, we have how much money ecotourism brings in and how many jobs are involved with that. Also important from a sprat perspective, if we manage to deplete sprat to a level like we've done with the herring and other species, it's gone. And so from our perspective, if we want to have fishing jobs or another generation of fishermen, we need to make sure that we try and protect the species from overfishing. And you can't say that you're not overfishing something if you have absolutely no scientific data whatsoever. The idea that they've been hammered like mad in the last few years and they've managed to bounce back and that's a good sign, that's shooting in the dark. We have no understanding of what's going on. And just, it's a good thing from wildlife conservation, because humpbacks and so many other species need sprat, not only to feed but also just to build up their resources so that they can then swim thousands of miles in other directions. It's a very important part of that wildlife's life. So it's a forage fish which feeds everything. To find the new government regulations. So on the one hand, we have the issue. We have the guidelines or the advice from ICES, which is 2,240 tonne. That's all of the boats all around Ireland. From our perspective, the large boats obviously cause a lot of damage, but also the smaller vessels are still able to catch quite a lot of sprat, probably half the quantity that's been caught annually. Another thing with bycatch, we spoke about bycatch earlier, and that is that at the moment there is no independent monitoring of bycatch for the sprat fishery. This is important because from our perspective, I've personally seen quite a lot of bycatch, and the issue is that the samples are being collected by the fishermen themselves and then sent off to the SFPA, the Sea Fishery Protection Agency, which regulates fishing, and they say that all of the samples come back perfectly clean, so the sprat fishery is a perfectly clean fishery. And I've seen with my own eyes that isn't so. It's not that we're trying to catch anyone out, it's just that there is lots of herring and other species which are at risk, and it'd be good to just have an independent monitoring of the bycatch. It's hard to understand the effect of a fishery unless if you have some sort of data, and at the moment we've done everything we possibly can to not have any data of this species, so I think it's important that we start collecting that. And again, we have no monitoring of what the actual sprat population is. On the other hand, the new ban is going to stop vessels over 18 metres from catching sprat from October 2026. There is a quota of 2,000 tonnes for this year. That's more of a transitionary. That's a number that's picked out of the air. That's a transitionary kind of a transition kind of figure to allow them to, if they still have nets and things, to just allow them to go from one kind of level to another. And there's still no quota for small boats. I'm probably repeating a lot of these things, but can we afford to? So this is just asks basically. If the sprat is gone, what will it mean for the livelihoods of fishermen and tourist operators? It'll put everyone under a lot of pressure. Robust scientific studies, that's something we should probably have done years ago. But I think it's vitally important that we try and get some scientific understanding as quickly as possible. Moratorium, temporary ban, lots of people from the fishing sector are vehemently against that because they think that once a moratorium or a temporary ban comes in place that it will stay closed. And I understand that because a lot of species have been hammered to a point where they cannot recover, and then when a temporary ban comes in place it's too late. So I think there is a balance there. At the moment we're just wanting scientific studies to be carried out so that we understand what a sustainable level of fishing is. And within a month's time we will have more sprat fishing happening, so time is of the essence. I think it's important that we move as quickly as possible. Save our sprat while we're seeking the science, while we're getting the understanding. Thank you. I think that covers me. I'm sure we'll cover a lot more in in the next section. 1 second, I'll stop share it now.
Lovely. All right. Thanks, Dolf.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Grace and Dolf, for those two presentations. Sharing a lot of information with everyone tuned in. Grant, so I suppose we'll just sort of have a look at some of those points a bit closer now. A few questions and a bit of a conversation about it. So that'll be the plan now. So we're gonna, we'll cover we're kind of covered a few different points here this evening. I mean, the big news is that this ban has been reintroduced. So we'll probably just look at that a little bit, because that's significant. But we do have Dolf was here tonight talking about what more might need to be done on top of that. So we'll look at both topics really this evening for the next half an hour or so. So there is we've got about a few questions coming in, so we'll get to those in a little while. But first I've got a couple of questions for the panelists. So on the ban, someone in the Q&A actually had a direct question about that. So we can probably cover that now, but maybe we can just kind of recap on what the ban is and what isn't allowed. So the question from Connor is, how is trawling for sprat defined? And is it only this certain type of trawling that is banned, or is all trawling banned? So that's a good point. So maybe we can just clarify what exactly is banned and what isn't there. Perhaps Grace, you could take that one now.
Yeah, no worries. So the ban that's now in place is that vessels over 18 meters will be excluded from trawling within the 6 nautical mile zone. So like Dolf had mentioned, there's lots of different types of trawling. So beam trawling, mid-water trawling, like a lot of the fishing for sprat would be mid-water trawling. So the nets aren't actually touching the bottom. They're being dragged through the water. So that's going to be banned by the larger vessels as well, but also things like bottom trawling. So, you know, there's some good points and some bad points about this ban. So it's a really good first step in sort of protecting our inshore areas. It helps to take some of the pressure off the fisheries that are within the inshore areas. And, you know, I do sort of believe that the inshore areas, so like right out to the 6 nautical miles or even further, really should be prioritized for small scale, you know, inshore vessels, because they don't have the capability to, you know, to go out further to sea like some of these larger vessels can do. So really having the inshore areas prioritized, you know, for the island fishing communities and for inshore fishing communities, I think is very important for the environment as well as the inshore economy. And it also helps to sort of share the marine resources more fairly as well amongst all different types of fishing. But even away from fishing, the benefits for the wider marine ecosystem, having the larger 18 meters restricted from this area are hopefully going to be quite large. So bottom trawling is banned. So bottom trawling is where, you know, large weighted nets are dragged along the seafloor, and this has been shown by countless different scientific studies, you know, how destructive this is. It has a huge amount of bycatch as well, which Dolf was mentioning. It's whenever, you know, species get caught in the nets that aren't being targeted. And it also disturbs marine sediments as well. And some marine sediments have got really high levels of carbon stored in them. There's actually research going on at the moment by the Quest project looking at different sediments in Irish waters and seeing how much carbon is in them and how much is actually released whenever they're disturbed, either by trawling or by you know, infrastructure like offshore renewable energy. So having bottom trawling banned from the larger vessels is a good step. And if you remember back to my presentation, there was a lot of protected areas in the inshore area as well. So having destructive fishing removed from those areas, even though it is just the larger boats, obviously smaller boats can still bottom trawl, but a larger boat with a bigger engine size, you know, they can cause more damage a lot quicker. So this is a good first step. But like we've sort of said, it's not perfect. Like Dolf has mentioned, the total allowable catch. So the government has put down that for the next year that the vessels over 18 metres are going to have a total allowable catch of 2,000 tonnes. And Dolf mentioned as well that ICES, International Council for Exploration of the Sea, who they put out recommendations for fisheries globally, and they have put out the precautionary principle approach for the sprat fishery because we don't have enough scientific data, and it's around 2,200 tonnes, and the Irish government has just sort of ignored the ICES recommendations and ignored the precautionary principle. So that there is an issue in itself as well. And then we also sort of raised the point of we're not sure how it would be monitored. Are there going to be more resources on the ground? Like Dolf kind of mentioned, like independent sort of analysis of landings. Are there going to be people there to make sure that this 2,000 tonne quota is actually stuck to as well? So yeah, so it's a good first step, but it doesn't actually solve all of the issues that we have in the inshore area.
Yeah, and on that last point, I see one of the comments in the chat actually. Someone suggested that putting foxes in charges of chickens doesn't work. Maybe that's not quite the same, but yeah, the independent monitoring certainly has big advantages when you're trying to protect something. Yeah, so we have this ban in place. It's going to, it's not in place yet, but is there any chance that is there any obstacles for this ban coming into place and getting enforced? Dolf, maybe you could speak to that, or do we think it's going to, like, the Irish Wildlife Trust has welcomed this ban as a good first step, as Grace quite clearly outlined there. There's more needs to be done. Can we expect to see this ban actually coming into place along the timelines suggested?
Yeah, Kieran, I can take that. I mean, one of the issues that has been talked about for a long time is that the over 18 metres have been quite vocal that any kind of restriction on their fishing within those areas is going to be challenged by court. Now, when the ban came in on the 22nd of July, I believe they had 8 weeks to challenge it. So that finishes on the 13th of September. They still have a bit of time. I would expect a challenge. I'm not talking off the top of my head here. I am saying that everybody within the over 18 metre sector have told me that they're going to challenge this, so I would expect a challenge, and that will send it into the courts, and it's up to the court then, it's up to the High Court as to which way it goes. For me, it's important to divide the issues. One is the 18 metre ban in the 6 nautical miles, and the other thing that we've talked about this evening is the sprat issue, and they're a bit they're kind of separate. I know they have been merged and kind of talked about in the same way, and one has an impact on the other. But I think that, from my perspective, the 6 nautical miles we've been talking about that for probably 20 years. The inshore sector has been saying that for 15 years, and 10 years ago, like, talking about bringing in this ban. So something that's important from the inshore sector, because the inshore sector is kind of on its knees. I think it's important to look at this in a more wider lens. If you look at all the species that the inshore sector have been catching in the last decade or 2 decades, they are slowly, through no fault of their own, through maybe not managing it properly, we're getting to the end of that. If you look at the brown crab, for instance, brown crab is in serious trouble. That's something which has been allowing inshore sector to survive. There's a lot of species which the inshore sector fishes that is in trouble, and I think that's why the 6 nautical mile ban is an important point, because it allows the smaller vessels to survive. And I'm not being the inshore sector is on its knees. I mean, if you look at all the species, the pollock, that fishery has been shut now for the last 2 years. I think in 2026 it opens up with 3,000 tonnes of a quota. That means the total allowable catch for that is 3,000 tonnes. It's important, I think, to say that in Ireland we have 2,000 fishing vessels overall. We have 23 vessels which make up the pelagic fleet, which are the bigger. They catch 80 to 90% of our quota species, and then the rest is filtered down. By the time it gets to the inshore sector, which are the under 18 metre section, very little quota is left for them. So just on a fairness level, I think it's important to have an idea, a concept of how unfair the fishing sector is. Mackerel, for instance, the national quota, the total national quota for Ireland is 40,000 tonnes for 2025 for this year. Of that, only 400 tonnes goes to the inshore fleet, which is about 1,600 vessels. So you have 1,600 vessels that have to cut up 3,000 tonne of pollock, 400 tonnes of mackerel and a few other species, and then you have brown crab, which is in serious decline. Like in the Mayo Donegal region alone, you have over 90,000 crab pots in the water. There used to be a season for fishing crab. That's gone. You can fish for crab, brown crab, 12 months of the year, 24/7. And the problem is that gear is becoming more efficient, and the problem is that there's less and less species which are abundant, and the abundance of species is getting less and less. And so therefore, this 6 nautical miles, I think, in that context, is a very vital piece to allow the inshore sector to keep going. If you look at it from a point of view, our 2 largest ports in this country, you have Killybegs and Castletownbere, none of them have a fish shop. And yet, if you look at all the small little, like Union Hall and other places, they have, because they're kept alive by the smaller vessels, they do have fish shops. So it's kind of I think from an economic point of view and from a social, keeping the coastal communities alive, the inshore sector is very important. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know, did I answer?
No, that's all very interesting insights. And so sticking with the ban for another minute, just because another way of looking at it, would you be interested to hear what you think is or the overarching goal of protecting marine life in Ireland. So in that inshore area, we do have a lot of protected areas and SACs and SPAs. So this ban is not a silver bullet. Is there other things, is there any other issues in protected areas, marine protected areas in Ireland that do they need more attention? Are they being properly monitored? Is there proper plans in place to manage them? These are things that maybe we could touch on now and tease out a little bit. So I don't know, could start with Grace, and then I'm sure Dolf can add something to that point.
So Ireland, I think I mentioned this, we went from having just over 2% of our waters designated as Natura 2000 sites, a few years ago. We now have it up to nearly 10%. And while that does look good, quite a lot has increased. There's a lot of issues with this. One of them is that, a lot of these areas, they were designated without any kind of public consultation. We didn't even know about areas being designated until, a couple of days before it was announced. And, there was one area designated for seabirds, but seabird experts hadn't been consulted beforehand. So this would be something that would definitely need to change in the future, especially if we get our marine protected area legislation, national legislation for that. We'd be calling for a sort of intensive, early and ongoing stakeholder engagement with not only experts, but with local communities, coastal communities, fishermen and fisherwomen, people that use the areas, so that everybody gets buy-in to this. Because at the moment, under the EU directives, this isn't a legal requirement and it's not being done. So it's just it's a very top-down approach, while we would want a bottom-up approach with everybody involved. At the moment as well, unfortunately, our protected areas, they're not being effectively monitored and they're not being effectively managed. One example of that is the special protection areas. In 2022, the European Commission did do a report. It looked at a few different member states, I think it was maybe 7, and how they implemented their special protection area for birds. So looked at how they were designated, how they were managed, and then most importantly, the conservation outcomes, how successful they were. And Ireland scored the lowest in every single category in that report, which was really, really depressing, but it just shows where we're at. There isn't effective management in place. So while this ban is, it's definitely something, it's definitely a good step, but we need actual site-specific management plans for our protected areas. We need to look at the species and the habitats that are in it, and not just put in measures to protect them. We have to protect the whole ecosystem. There's no point just protecting an area for dolphins, for example, if you're not also protecting their foods, protecting their food source. Or protecting a species of fish but not protecting where it goes to spawn, things like that. So we really need to take a wider ecosystem-based approach when it comes to managing the areas. Sorry, the sun is shining right in my face here, so get a bit distracted.
That's a good drizzle here.
Yeah. I know, shouldn't complain.
Drizzle in Bantry Bay.
I think you covered a lot. I had a thought, but it's now gone.
That's all right. Well, that thought's coming back to you. There's a question that maybe you could just touch on, Dolph, is that so we're talking about the MPAs there, and you mentioned how they're not on admiralty charts.
Teacher.
Yeah, there's a question here, like what's the stumbling blocks to having them MPAs put on admiralty charts? This comes in from Pauline. I don't know if you're aware of the stumbling blocks or what's the blocker there, or like how that information can be added. So Pauline was just wondering about that.
Well, the current Natura 2000 sites or MPAs, they're managed. I'd say managed in a very managed by the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So I would think if the National Parks and Wildlife Service kind of asked for them to be put on the charts. The charts are made in Britain. There's an office in Britain that deals with that. And any kind of change, the right minister would have to just make a request and to be done. I mean, the National Parks and Wildlife Service have all this on a digital file, so all they'd have to do is switch it over. It could be done in the morning. There was another question about quota for Sprat, and I'm thinking that the reason why they couldn't put a quota for Sprat inside that public consultation is because to be able to set a quota, you need to have data. We have no data, so therefore we can't set a quota. It's kind of chicken and egg kind of thing. The other thing in relation to the SACs and SPAs, I think it's important to note that we have, the Irish state has given a commitment to have 30% of our marine area protected by 2030. So within 5 years, I suppose, or less than 5 years, 4.5 years, we're supposed to have 30% protected. Currently, the only thing that has changed between going from 2% to 10% is that some of the Irish population think that the marine environment is now being protected. In reality, what's happening is we have zero protection for our marine ecosystems. But if you have a pier or another bit of essential infrastructure, say on an island or something, if you have a pier on an island and you need to repair that, that takes a lot longer if your pier is inside an SAC or an SPA. So people on islands and in other areas start hating the marine protected areas because they don't do anything for the marine ecosystem, but they do make it much more difficult for anybody living in those things. So we need to balance that up. There's no reason to be protecting stuff if the environment is still being trashed. Because we still, like for instance, in the Waterford estuary, we have Tway Chad, which eats sprat, which is it's protected in the Waterford estuary, and yet you're catching sprat in the Waterford estuary, which is a direct food source of one of the qualifying interests. So we do need to start getting, if these marine protected areas are to mean anything, we have to have management plans. We have to know what's supposedly protected in those areas and do it effectively.
Thanks, Dolph. Okay, so yeah, the message coming out quite clearly is that the ban is welcome, but we need more. We need management plans for each marine protected area for a start, and then we also need maybe more different ways of managing the fisheries themselves, the fishing stock. So coming back to Sprat and ways of managing Sprat. So, Dolph, the Save Our Sprat Bantry Bay has been bringing up this idea of a moratorium on Sprat, and you mentioned it in your presentation. So let's just jump into that for a few minutes. A moratorium obviously means no fishing. So I know you covered it in the presentation, but maybe just very briefly recap why you're proposing that. Like, why do we need to? What's the urgency here?
The urgency is simple. At the moment, we feel that if we keep going, in a matter of years, from our perspective, in 2 or 3 years, we may have pushed Sprat to a point where it cannot recover. From a scientific, looking at different species that rely on Sprat, we see a massive reduction. So we think that it is absolutely essential that we have some sort of a halt to the Sprat fishery, and at the same time we should have been doing it already, but we need to gather scientific data as to how large the Sprat stock is, so that we have an understanding as to what level we can catch stuff if there is going to be a Sprat fishery. We'd like to see, if there was a Sprat fishery, we'd also like to make sure that this was caught by the inshore vessels, smaller vessels, which would help them survive, and also for human consumption. I think at the moment, catching large amounts of forage fish, which is very important from a marine ecosystem point of view, and pulping it and churning it up and making salmon farm food or food for the finfish industry, I think that's just it's crazy. It's mad. But the moratorium is basically calling for a temporary halt on fishing so that we can gather scientific data. And from our perspective, there is compensation available. you have European funding through MFAF, that's the European Maritime Fishery and Aquaculture Fund. They have 300 million every 6 years. We're halfway through that tranche at the moment, and the thing is that they are prioritising conservation measures and prioritising sustainable fisheries. So there is funding available. The amount of money we're talking here, I mean, the MFAF funding is 300 million. This is maximum of 3 million a year. It's a very small amount of money, and the impact you will have is a lot. From a biodiversity and an marine ecosystem point of view, and also like long term, it makes no sense from a fishing perspective to wipe out a species now and to have nothing left, like we've done with so many other species, like the herring, for instance. You hammer them and then they disappear and then they're gone. And like if we had held on to that fishery, though, if it had been managed properly, and we could have actually had herring going on into the future, it would have kept a lot of fishing jobs alive. Whereas what we're doing at the moment is a smash grab operation. It's basically grab as much as we possibly can today and forget about tomorrow. And from our perspective, that doesn't help the marine ecosystem. It doesn't help the ecotourism jobs. It doesn't help anyone. I think it definitely does not help the fishing sector.
So just a little more question on the moratorium idea, that like how long would it roughly be, how long would it need for the analysis to be done, this kind of analysis that we want to see done, more data on Sprat's numbers, proper survey, and like how long roughly do you think that might take?
I've spoken to people within scientific circles in the Marine Institute, which would probably be doing the studies. They're talking 3 years to get a proper overview of that, because the 3 years would give enough of an understanding as to how big it is, so that we could then set a quota in place. At the moment, no quotas are being put in place, no limits are being put in place, because we don't have the scientific data to back it up. The only reason you can set a limit is if you know at what's a sustainable level. At the moment, we have no idea, so it's just free for all.
Okay, I just looking to the Q&A. Noel Carr from the Federation of Irish Salmon and Sea Trade Anglers has typed in a question for us. There's a bit of background there that we probably don't have time to cover all of it, but he's saying that his organization are aware of the Sprat fishery around the coast and concerned that salmon and sea trade are significant victims of bycatch, including with the boats under 18 meters as well. So he said that they have good experience of the buyout in the past in 2017. I'm not sure exactly what buyout that is, but maybe one of you do. And Noel's question is, how can we campaign for a buyout of this fishery now, as most of it is going to fish meal anyway? So we mentioned that as well. A lot of it's not actually going to human consumption. So Noel's just wondering about the buyout, and that's kind of another question we were interested in, is like, how would it work? How much would it cost, or is there funding available? Has it been done in the past that a fishery has been sort of people have been supported to not fish or fish in a different way? So yeah, just maybe both of you might have some ideas there on how we can kind of move towards stopping fishing a certain species, and how we can support fishing people when we do that. Yeah, so maybe we could whoever wants to jump in first, little race there.
Go on, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I can give my thoughts. I think Dolf will know a bit more about MFAF and things like that. But just reading the question here as well. Well, some of the ways that we could support sort of inshore fisheries, there isn't, I think Dolf did touch on this as well, there isn't really a fair share of quotas given out. So each sort of member state in the EU is given a quota, and then they have to share this out between the different fishing fleets. And under the Common Fisheries Policy, which is like an EU legislation, and it's meant to ensure that there are sustainable fisheries across the EU, there's an article within that, Article 17, which is largely ignored by Ireland and by other member states as well. But it's basically on how fishing quotas are allocated. So the member states meant to take into account a whole bunch of different reasons, including like the historical catch data, but also looking at sustainable fishing methods, environmentally friendly ways of fishing, and also methods that use less fuel. So going by this, then really, smaller inshore vessels should be getting a lot more of the quota, but unfortunately this isn't happening. It seems that member states just kind of look at historical catch data, and for some boats, some smaller vessels, like, it wasn't a legal requirement for them to keep logbooks for a long time as well. So it's not really fair. It doesn't, like, on paper it all sounds like it would be very equitable and nice, but it doesn't actually take in the realities of the inshore fishing fleet. So that would be one way of kind of making things fair and helping to make it more sustainable as well, because they don't have a fair share of fishing quotas. Of course, they're going to go for try and fish as much as they can of the things that they are allowed to fish. So that's why even potting, which should be a sustainable fishing method, just the static pots that are put down to catch different species, if there's too much of that happening, that becomes unsustainable as well. But the government is kind of not really giving the inshore sector much of a choice, because they're not allocating out fair quotas. So if they did do this, that would actually really help with the sustainability of not just all sort of fisheries in the inshore sector, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grace. Go ahead there, Dolf. Yeah.
No, I think you covered a lot of it. I think there are, like, from the marine protected areas, does have a lot of funding connected to. There is funding streams through life programs and different things. So there is a lot of money coming from Europe through MFAF, through life, different that could be utilised to try and help fishermen just temporarily reduce fishing effort. I think in the longer term, you've touched on it. I think if you look at the problems with quota, like if 23 vessels can catch 80 to 90% of the quota for a country, and then 1,600 vessels have to fight over the little bit of quota that's left, and a lot of the fish that the inshore sector do catch is non-quota species like brown crab and things. There's definitely an issue there. We also have an issue with the European vessels, where if you look at how much fish is being caught within the Irish EEZ, the area 200 miles from the baseline, within that area, which is under Irish control, if you look at how much fish gets caught by European vessels over Irish vessels, and I know a lot of that is again down to historical stuff, but it does kind of drive home the point of how unfair it is when you have certain, it is all out of balance. And I think if we are to look at trying to bring some sort of sustainability and, just making sense for our fishermen, it makes sense to try and correct that.
And is there just something I've seen a few people mention in the chat, like someone said potentially, fisher people could be, they have the skills to help out with conservation and data gathering. Like, is there examples of in Ireland or overseas? Someone mentioned Scotland in the chat. Like, is there examples of that working? Absolutely.
The fishermen are the ones that understand, that see what's coming up out in the nets, and they see trends and they see stuff. I mean, from a scientific data collection perspective, they are at the forefront of it. They would be ideal to manage stuff. From a marine protected area thing, I've often said that without the fishermen on board, it's not going to work. So they are vital that they are behind it. So I think we need to bring fishermen with us to try and protect our areas. If you look at the V-notching for lobsters, that's a conservation measure which is funded through MFAF, the European Maritime Fishery and Aquaculture Fund. It's been going for a number of years. It's funded from there to BIM, but BIM is getting their funding from there. And basically, lobster V-notching is a conservation measure which has worked very well. That's the reason why we still have large amounts of lobster around, because they get a certain amount of money for catching lobster and putting it back. If something like that could be, that's a conservation measure which they get a small bit of money for doing something, and from a conservation perspective, it's worked amazingly well. And I think that shows that if you give a small bit of money to try and do something sustainably and a conservation measure, I think that's a great scheme, and I think it shows that something like this can really work.
Thanks, Dolf. Yeah, and anything to add there, Grace, or any stuff from overseas, or any ideas?
I can add in just in regards to sort of marine protected areas. There, recently in Portugal, they've designated a huge marine protected area, and they did it bottom up as well, and it's been really successful. But they've taken along all the local communities. They had buy-in from the very, very beginning. So did all the fishermen. Again, that's how they got all the, you know, like Dolf said, like they're out on the water all day, every day. They know the areas better than anybody. So it's vital that they're taken along when it comes to designating and protecting the marine environment. And yeah, the Portuguese example of this is a really, really good example. There's more information about that online if you want to look into it more, but that would be a model that Ireland should really be following when it comes to designating more MPAs.
Right. Okay, we're moving towards the end of the evening. Dolph, any questions in the chat, or Dolph and Grace, just maybe if either of you seen questions you're particularly keen to answer, or you could, I know it's hard reading through them all.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of comments. I think I'd first like to thank the Irish Wildlife Trust for having this webinar, because I think it's an important discussion to have. There is a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of different topics, and even merged together, like the Sprat issue merged with the 6 nautical miles. I see a question there. I think yes. It's possible that the ban that has come in will have a positive impact on Sprat. But again, we have no understanding of what a sustainable level of fisheries is, and the inshore sector, you know, have the ability to do serious damage to it. And I'm not saying damage in a point of view of trying to have a go at the inshore sector. I'm just saying that we have no idea what a sustainable level of fishing is. So that's an important point. The other thing is that the larger vessels are almost certainly going to have a good go at this through the courts. And if I know anything about the High Court, it is very unclear as to what is solid. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this was overturned again and we go back down into another 5 years of messing around. So from that perspective, we do need to take steps to protect Sprat, which we know is in a problem. From my perspective, the 6 nautical miles is solely about trying to keep the inshore sector alive. So it's 2 separate issues, and they are being muddled and merged. I think this is much easier to keep it straight if you can just look at the Sprat species as one topic, and the 6 nautical miles, which is there to try, which is something that has been talked about for the last 20 years to try and bring a bit more balance to the inshore sector over the larger vessels. So I think it's 2 different issues. And yes, stopping 18-metre vessels from fishing inside will have an impact on one species, but seeing as we have no data collection, no monitoring of bycatch, nothing, we still have no understanding of what damage it's doing. I think I'm not going to be jumping with joy to say the Sprat issue is now finished, because it isn't. It's not enough.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and that kind of does answer pretty well Calvin's point there in the Q&A. So thanks for that, Dolph. And yeah, we've kind of muddied the waters by putting both topics in this webinar as well. But the ban did just come out a few weeks ago, so we wanted to mention that. So yeah, so your point being that the ban is one thing, but looking at this very vital species of Sprat on its own needs to be considered as well, particularly because the ban may be challenged and delayed in the courts. So that's
no measures within that ban have actually looked at trying to protect Sprat long term.
Yeah. Okay, that's clear enough. Grace, was there anything else you wanted to any last question you wanted to quickly touch on from the Q&A, or just any points you wanted to make before we finish up? Nope. We're not hearing you yet there, Grace.
Sorry, I was muted. I think we did cover quite a lot of the questions. Yeah, I suppose sort of one of the points important to point out, like, it's not about sort of point and blame. I don't think any of us here, you know, are wanting to point blame at anybody. It's definitely not about like blaming the fishing industry. And if we do actually want to effectively protect the marine environment, like conservationists and the fishing sector, like, we have to work together, and we want to work together towards it, because at the end of the day, we're all wanting the same thing. We want a healthy marine environment. We want healthy fish populations into the future to help with the fishing economy, and also to help with our broader marine environment as well. So I think it's really important that we keep the conversation open, that we keep talking to each other, and that we work together on this.
Thanks, Grace.
That's perfect.
Here. Grand. So that's been a great discussion, and we didn't get to everything in the Q&A, but we sort of worked a lot of the questions into our discussion there. So thanks everyone for tuning in. The if anyone wants more information on just Dolf, I'll let you sort of clarify if people are, because there's a lot of in the chat in particular, a lot of people are very interested in the idea of a moratorium and really, enthusiastic about saving Sprat. So is there anywhere people can find out more about that? Just give a shout out to that before we finish up.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. We have a website, we have a Facebook page, and we have we're on social media and different platforms. And I think it's important that we keep the conversation going. We're all just local people trying to do the best we can, and I think it's important to have the different voices to make sure that we have, that we have everybody's voice involved. Like Grace has mentioned, just doing things without any consultation, without having the fishermen with us, I think is wrong. Yeah. We have a petition as well, which is, I think, up around the 5,000 now at this point. It's getting close to the submissions and the consultation. It's at saveoursprat.ie is our webpage. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Dolf. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. Most importantly, I'd like to thank Grace Carr and Dolf D'hondt for joining us tonight and sharing their ideas and their knowledge and enthusiasm for marine protection. We are the Irish Wildlife Trust. If you like our work, if you like our webinars, please do think about supporting our work, either by becoming a member of our charity, or you could always even just follow our newsletter to find out about more events, more webinars, and more about what we do. So you can pop on to IWT.ie if you want to join the charity or find out more or join our newsletter. So thank you to Grace, thank you to Dolf, and I'll say good night, everyone.